Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and I have today with me a very special guest. Her name is Florence Christopher, and I've known Florence for a while, and it's been a bit since we connected. I was her instructor when she was doing a certification course, and we had a great time together, and I am so excited to bring her information and expertise to you because she is an expert in sugar addiction and food addiction. And so we're going to have a great conversation today. So Florence, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being on here.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So kind of tell me, how did you get into food addiction and sugar addiction? I want to know your story. So my listeners can like, hey, that sounds like me.
Sure. I'll hit you up with some highlights. I can see when I look back into my childhood that I had a very unnatural obsession with sugar. Obsession, that might be a bit of a strong word. Interest in sugar. I definitely was the one waiting for desserts. I was the one that ate sugar all day long. I was the one that had, devoured their Christmas baking before Christmas even came, Halloween candy. Like, it was really clear looking back that I really loved refined carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And slowly over time, it was also really clear that by the time I hit my mid to late teens, things were falling apart on my body really badly. I was thin. I was the only thing that hadn't really been overly impacted until I was in my late teens. And then all of a sudden the weight started to come on. But up until then, I had depression, I had mood swings, I had brain fog, I had infection after infection, I had blinding migraines. I was not happy or healthy. I mean, certainly there was some times in my life I was happy.
Sure.
I mean, there was lots of my childhood that was good, but boy, was it ever obvious in hindsight how much my diet was impacting me. And I was in and out of doctor's offices. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I had a file that was really thick. I had seen specialists who referred me to other specialists about these chronic migraines. I had cystic acne. I was double my dress size. I was suicidally depressed. And I just couldn't figure it out. And more medications and different medications and combining medications. And I mean, they really didn't have a lot to offer me. They were trying their best, the doctors that I was being referred to and I was working with. And of course, I was referred to psychologists who just wanted to put me on more pharmaceuticals, and nothing was getting better.
Right.
Nothing was getting better. And I was at wit's end, especially when I had migraines, because I'd be sitting there in the dark, violently ill, suicidally depressed, vomiting, thinking, what is wrong? Like, I partied with my friends last night in university. They woke up this morning and went and had a great day, and I'm going to spend 3 days miserable. I'm doing the same things. They're my roommates. We're eating the same. What is going on here? And I remember as I sat there in the dark thinking, I'll do anything, body. Like, I know you're not happy. I will do anything. I just didn't know what to do.
Right.
So I one day had a girlfriend of mine pass me a copy of the book called The Sugar Blues, and it was written by William Duffy. And it's one of the very first books that talk
me
about.
too. Yeah.
You too, right?
Yeah.
It was like life-changing.
Life-changing, totally.
But she passed me this book saying, hey, maybe this will help you with your migraines. And I remember thinking, what?
Are you crazy?
As if it's sugar related. Like, hello, I've seen all the best doctors. I'm on all the best medications. I'm like, as if it's as simple as, sugar. But I went to had a migraine and I thought, you know what have I got to lose? I'm going to buy. And I literally tossed the book. I had these old milk crates in the back of my student college university day bedroom. And I kind of stuffed in a bunch of stuff and I dug it out and I thought, I'm going to read it. I'll try anything. And I read it and it was literally life-changing. 2-day read. I knew for me it resonated as true. I know there's people who do not fall on the sugar addiction spectrum, can take it or leave it. It's not their thing. Their brain doesn't light up. It doesn't lead to cravings and compulsive overconsumption. And to them, I say, oh, God bless you. You're so lucky.
Yes.
And in which case, I just have one piece of advice that isn't mine. It's really, you're hearing it everywhere, but I'll back it up. Just break up with it. It's easy for you. You're not hooked into it. Just don't touch it. You don't need it. You don't even care about it. Just let it go. Like, I know it's convenient. I know it's cheap. It's easy to buy. It's very affordable. I know that it's in everything. And I know that there'll be some effort to avoid it, but do it. And for those of us who fall on the addiction spectrum, which I very much do, my story from here will start to resonate. So the light bulb goes on, and I know, like, people who know when they know what they know, what they know.
They know. Yes.
In my bones, in my soul, in the depth of my being, this book spoke to me. So I was like, I'm going to give up sugar. It's going to help with, hopefully with my migraines, certainly, hopefully with my weight, mood swings, a long list of other health conditions. I had cystic acne. I was on Accutane for that.
Me too. Yes.
You too?
Yes. Two rounds of it. Yeah, it was bad.
Bad. Yeah. It deeply damaged my system. I'm so sensitive.
Me too.
My fingers split. I've never fully recovered. I don't think I've ever been fully hydrated since I was on long doses of Accutane. Anyways, I also did 8 months of daily antibiotics when I later developed stage 4 rosacea. Like, crazy amount of pharmaceuticals have gone in this body. So I read this book. I was about 20, 21, probably 20s, I think 20, 21, somewhere in there. Yeah. And I was like, I'm doing this. This is going to change my life. I'm so grateful. I'm so excited. But, you start to realize, like, isn't everything? Like, what am I going to eat?
Right. Really? Yeah.
Especially back then, like, there was no internet.
No.
There were no other books on it. There were no coaches. I was not aware of any 12-step programs. That didn't come to my awareness till I was 35. Like, I had a long stretch of just me trying to duke it out, figure it out with sugar. But I read everything I could get my hands on. And there was another book that was referenced in the Sugar Blues. It was called Pure, White, and Deadly by Yudkin, who we know is really the grandfather of the sugar-free movement. And I read his book, and I read all of his references. And eventually I realized that this should be really easy. I'm pretty motivated. I've seen the science. I am persuaded that it's at least worth an experiment. It's at least worth trying to get off it for like 3 months or something to see if it improves my health.
Yeah.
See what happens. And I couldn't get 3 months, Laurie. Could not do it.
Yeah.
I could not do it. And I kept thinking, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm a pretty headstrong, motivated. I was a long distance runner. I was an excellent student. I put my head to stuff. I made things happen, and I just couldn't get this sorted out. I'd go 3 days, I'd go a week, I'd relapse. And part of it was now, as I call it the sugar dragon, the addictive voice in my head. It would say things like, oh, you've been so good. You could just have a bite. And then for me and my body, when I have a bite, the first bite, it activates a very predictable cascade of, neurophysiological responses. And it's kind of a bit of a Russian roulette. I can't always know exactly how it's going to land. Maybe I'll just have one cookie and be fine. Maybe it's going to wind up 3 rows. Maybe it's going to be, I'm fine for day 2. And then day 3 and 4, there's an uptick of my consumption. And then on day 7, I'm back on Coca-Cola. Like, I just don't know. But I do know this, that after the first bite, for me, I activate the addictive response.
Right.
I have a very elevated brain chemistry response to it. And then I have a crash. And then I have cravings. And I go like this. My blood sugar goes like this. My mood goes like this. My neurochemistry, my neurotransmitters go like this.
Just life in general goes like this, right?
Life in general goes like this. There's no traction. There's no peace. Totally. My relationships go like this. Like, oh, I would not be happily married, let me tell you, if I hadn't eventually figured out how to unhook from sugar and become a whole food woman and stay that way. So I'm muddling my way forward. Some stretches of success, relapsing, frustrated as all get out. And then I realized I've actually made the problem worse, because now, in my efforts to unhook from sugar, I have now escalated my disordered eating. I wouldn't say it was overly disordered before. I just ate sugar all day long. I just constantly topped myself up. Really, when you think about it, my breakfast was cereal with extra sugar, of course, Laurie.
Of course, because you do frosted and sugar. Yes.
What's that?
I said I used to do Frosted Flakes and sugar on top of it.
Oh, you did too, right?
I did, yeah.
Yes, totally. And if there wasn't sugar left in the bowl, I probably didn't have enough in there. And then I would drink it with the milk and the leftover sugar.
Of course. I know our listeners are relating to that. I know they're like, oh yeah. I remember.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yep.
I would have pancakes or waffles. I would certainly have orange juice or apple juice or some other extra refined, sugar without the fiber in my bloodstream. I can't believe that we do this to our bodies and our children still to this day.
We didn't know. We didn't know.
We didn't know.
We didn't
People
know.
still don't know.
They still don't know, which is why you and I do what I do.
That's why we do what we do.
Yes.
Or I would have toast and strawberry jam.
Yeah.
Right. So that was breakfast, like just a boatload of refined carbohydrates. And then lunch was white bread sandwiches. Now, this is maybe a little bit unusual. For some reason, my Dutch side of the family, they would put chocolate sprinkles on it. We'd have butter, chocolate sprinkles, and we'd roll it up and we'd eat it. Or brown sugar on the table. Please pass the brown sugar. We'd put it on the bread with the butter, the white bread, and we'd get it so it was all gooey. And I would chew it, and the brown sugar the crystals would crunch on my teeth. Yeah. Lunch. That was lunch, Laurie. And probably a dessert, maybe, and a pop. And then, of course, I've snacked in between there. And then dinner is like pasta and who knows. I mean, there was probably some chicken and vegetables and salad in there a little bit. But wow, it was all day long. It was all day long. So I didn't know that I had a problem with sugar because I didn't know till I tried to take it out.
Yeah. Just
how intense the cravings were, how it was in everything I was eating. I didn't even know what to eat. I was like, I liked whole food. Thank God for that I really enjoyed salads and whole foods and broccoli and chicken and salmon and black beans. And I love whole foods. It's good. But I didn't know how to prepare it. I didn't know what to do for breakfast if it wasn't a refined carbohydrate. So eventually you learn what you eat for breakfast and what you eat for lunch and what you eat for dinner. Same. There's no breakfast isn't special, dinner isn't special. I can have eggs for dinner and I can have salmon for breakfast. Who cares?
It's just food.
What's that?
It's just food. It's all food, can be eaten any time of the day.
Any time of the day, totally. So I have now got a binge eating disorder. So I have tried to pull sugar back. The addiction fought back. So what used to be like sugar all day long became sugar binges. So now I'm like, oh my God. And I'm in and out of therapy appointments. I am doing hypnotherapy. I have got psychologists working on this with me. I'm like, I'm trying to break up with sugar. I don't know why I can't do this. And they're all like, well, honey, why don't we really talk about the real issues here? So tell me about your childhood. And I'd be like, shit show. But can we talk about the sugar?
Right.
Because I have an addiction in play here. I could see it's an addiction, and everyone would laugh at me and they'd be like, oh, honey, sugar's not addictive. That's in your head. It's a coping mechanism to deal with childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences. And why don't we talk about that? Really would love to talk about that. Can we also talk about
talk about the addiction part of it?
Can we talk about this food problem? Because it's really the top of the pile.
Right.
Top of the pile for me. Blinding migraines, suicidal depression, terribly overweight, miserable. I can see my blood sugars, cravings. I'm frustrated. I need help with this. No one could help me, Laurie. Zero. Nobody. They weren't taking it seriously, or they didn't have the skills. They didn't believe in sugar addiction. So again, I'm muddling my way forward, and I am making progress. I am totally making progress. For the most part, I've become a whole food woman. But I'd have a little and then I'd relapse, and that would have to ride itself out till I was miserable enough to get back on track. But those stretches in the ditch were getting shorter, and my stretches of eating whole foods were getting longer, and the transformation was happening. My migraines are rare. I lost my weight. I no longer have cystic acne or rosacea, thank God.
Yes.
Like my whole life transformed. And I know that if I hadn't read that book, if I hadn't figured out how to unhook from sugar truly and completely, I could have stayed in that struggle till the day I died.
Right.
Till the day I died. Right. And I probably would have died prematurely. And some of the days I had were pretty dark. Maybe I might even have followed through on some of the suicidal ideation. It was awful. It was awful
Right.
what sugar did for me. So I'll tell you this little part of the story too. When I was about 25 or 6, I've been 4 or 5 solid years on this path, reading everything I can, talking about it with everybody, being very annoying. Very annoying. Like, don't eat that. Oh my God. They'd be like, shut up. I'm
You're
eating the
not inviting
pizza.
Florence to any more parties.
That's right. Killjoy. Don't eat the pizza on the pop. It'll kill you. Anyways.
Right.
But I used to eventually say to my friends, I think I'm addicted to sugar. And they'd be like, Florence, that's ridiculous. That's hilarious. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You cannot be addicted to sugar. But eventually it didn't matter if I was the only person on the planet that was addicted to sugar. I knew. I didn't even really know what addiction was, but intuitively, there's something not right here. I'm very motivated. This shouldn't be this hard. What is going on? What's the piece I'm missing here? And I thought it was the addiction. So in trying to do addiction recovery on my own with zero skills and zero understanding of how to do it right, I have now I've created like this binge eating disorder problem, food obsession issue. Like it was awful. But I realized that they were tied. That somehow in trying to clean up my diet, there was this pushback. And I didn't understand what that rebellion was. I didn't understand what that resistance was. I didn't understand how in doing the on again, off again escalated the impact of the drug on my brain, which makes the addiction worse. And so many people in the intuitive eating world will say, wow, if you'd found intuitive eating sooner, you might have been able to sort of do the Janine Roth approach, which eat to, have a little till you're satisfied. I did the Janine Roth approach.
Right.
I
We
read
didn't know that was the approach then, but we tried it. I'm hearing you. Yes.
I did. I read all of her books. They were out at this time. I read all of them. I did everything she said.
Yep.
Eat when you're hungry, finish when you're satisfied.
Yep.
Well, I'm never going to reach the bottom of when you're on the addiction spectrum, the food addiction, sugar addiction spectrum, you're never going to reach that bottom. Not really. No, it keeps it alive. And then of course, when you're sensitive and you've already deeply damaged your metabolism, even a little could keep all of my negative consequences of sugar consumption alive. Yeah, so I decided to go off to Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland to do my master's on the topic. And here was my thesis, that there might be a connection. I wanted to explore and unpack the possible connection between sugar addiction, and eating disorders in women. They accepted me. I get over in front of the committee. There was a bunch of people kind of hearing out the thesis, and they were trying to find who would be, the lead for me and with me. And I was sharing my topic and my personal experience and these little snippets of research. And in 1968, there was a study done with mice at Laval University. And this is what they found. And here's this book. And here's Yudkin's research. And I'm sharing it all. And I'm on fire. And I'm so passionate. And I'm like, I know I'm onto something here. And they're all like, wow, okay, very interesting. Well, leave your research with us. And I left my little bits and bobs of studies. And they came back, I think it was the next week, or it was fairly quickly, and said, okay, so yeah, you're not going to be doing this topic at this university. You need to pick a new topic because there's no evidence to suggest that sugar is harmful to the body, and certainly no evidence to suggest that sugar is addictive. And there's zero evidence to suggest that it has anything to do with disorders and eating disorders in women. That's psychological. That's trauma. They wouldn't say the word trauma then, but they would have said that's psychological. That's the domain of psychology, not physiology. And you're going to need one guy said at the end of the sort of conversation I had with the committee, you will not embarrass this institution with this topic.
Wow. Oh, look at you now.
Yes. And then the world eventually books came out. Dr. Kathleen Day Mason came out with Sugar Addicts.
Yeah.
Potatoes Not Prozac, the Sugar Addiction Recovery. I forget her second book, Sugar Addiction Recovery Program, Little Sugar Addicts. So she came out. I took her books to bed, literally to bed. Like I was like,
she gets me.
She gets me. She gets it. I'm not crazy. This is the thing. This is really a thing. And then, of course, there's an explosion of books and coaching and 12-step programs and doctors that are on board with this now. There's zero doubt that sugar addiction is real. And since I know that keto is your thing, it's so very helpful for people to not fall into the keto dessert trap.
Yes.
If you're on the addiction spectrum, especially, like, I know if you're not, you could probably get away with a little bit in special occasions and you'll be fine. You don't experience that addictive response. But for most people, it's still processed chemical junk, right? Those artificial sweeteners. But for those of us that are trying to do keto, we're trying to become whole food men and whole food women. We're trying to reverse chronic disease and prevent worse ones from coming down, down the line. Sugar's not our friend. And if you're finding that information isn't enough to help you unhook, you might be on the spectrum. And I do have a quiz. I can certainly sort of ask some questions to see if you might fall on the addiction spectrum. Then for you can't crush keto until you break up with sugar. And the best way to do it is a breakup. Breakup, like, make it decisive, make it like, this is over. I'm done with the experience of sugar addiction or food addiction. And by food addiction, it just means there's flour, sugar. It's 12 to 15 molecules of glucose strung together. And when we refine it, it's pure sugar in our bloodstream. Yes. But it's just not sweet. So people think, no, sugar's sweet. No, sugar is a saccharide. Saccharides are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are sugars, like, same. Yes. Sugar and the word carbohydrate are the same. They are used interchangeably. It's just a question of whether or not there's fructose in the mix. And if there's fructose in the mix, then it can taste quite sweet on our tongue. So flour, corn chips, potato chips, any refined carbohydrates, alcohol, all of them, any whole food, used to be perfectly healthy, natural whole food carbohydrate that's refined in any way is typically a problem for those of us who fall on the sugar food addiction spectrum. So yeah, fortunately for me, in my about 35, I had a almost sugar-free pregnancy, whole food only pregnancy. I'd had a piece of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, and I had a cheese sandwich when I was really hungry, and I'd got stuck somewhere and I ate it. And ooh, was I sick. I had the only time I felt sick in my pregnancy. I had a migraine. I felt nauseous. I was like, note to self. Doesn't work for me. So, and then I had a pumpkin pie, and that was it. The rest were whole foods, like 100%, because I was really committed to not have a baby that was going to follow in these footsteps. And then when I was nursing Sky, my daughter, I was so committed to not dripping sucrose into my daughter. But I relapsed when she was about, I think she was about 1, maybe just younger. No, she was over 1 because I'd gone back. I was a university professor and I'd gone back to teach. And just part-time, it was a couple of courses, but it was just enough that I was tired and I was starting to run a bit thin, and I was still nursing and writing, marking papers and just doing a bit much for my system at that time still. And I relapsed. And I remember coming home and nursing Sky after having eaten like 8 white chocolate chip macadamia cookies on the way home from the university. 8. By that point, if you have a little, it's like, especially after a long stretch of not having any.
Right. That's a big deal.
It's like, oh my God, I might not get this again. Right. I just eat them all. So I got home and I just thought, I don't want this. I don't want to put this in. I don't want to bring my daughter into this. It's one thing to damage my own body and to bring myself down. I am not doing this to my daughter. And I fell to my knees. No, sorry, that's not the full story. I bought a 12-pack of white chocolate chip macadamia cookies. I ate 8 of them. 4 of them when I got home, I thought, cuss words galore. Enough of this bullshit. I wrapped it all up. It was in a package, and I put the cellophane around it and I stuck it in the garbage. And then I traipsed. After I nursed Sky and connected later that night, I took the garbage out because I didn't want the cookies in my house, to the very back of my house, dead of winter, like Sorel boots on, big parka, back out the back door, through the gate, through my backyard, trudging through the snow to open up the back, to stick that garbage bag in the garbage, close it and get home. only to wake up the next morning around 6:30. And the first thing I could think about were those 4 cookies out in the
Thinking
garbage.
cookies out there. Yes.
And I knew that they were wrapped up enough that they'd probably be fine. So parka goes on, the boots go on. I'm traipsing outside in the dark, digging through the trash can to retrieve those last 4 cookies. And as I'm walking back, I'm like, this is crazy. This is insane. This is insane. This is sad. And I ate those cookies and I fell to my knees. And I'm not, especially not then, I wouldn't say I was a woman of faith at all. I didn't know what I believed in, but I dropped to my knees and prayed like no one's ever prayed before, facing in the direction of my closet, which was an open closet. So it looked like I was praying to my shoes, my Sorel boots. Please help
no
some.
more. Yes.
What's that?
No more.
No more. I need help. Like I don't know what I can do long stretches, but
yeah.
Once I listen to the voice in my head that's suggesting and justifying, I'm off to the races again. And I have to hit some new bottom before I've got it. I can pull myself back together to go, we're done with this. Next day, there was an article in the newspaper for a 12-step program for food addiction recovery. I was like, what? This exists? So I went to a meeting and I was met by a man named Ron, who I will remember to the day I die. He just put his arm around me. He's like, kiddo, it's over. It's over. The whole nightmare's over. We get you. We understand. Addiction is real. And if you fight it, you'll lose it. Willpower doesn't work, but here is what does work, right? And so they gave me a meal plan, tools, community, support, and above all, what they showed me was that it was possible to do this long term. There was people in those meetings that had, some of them had as many as 20 years of back-to-back abstinence.
Yeah.
Not that particular meeting because it was newer, but like people in the program had 20 years, no relapse, no sugar, no flour, no sweeteners, no alcohol, no junk, processed, nothing. They ate whole foods, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals, no snacks. And it was balanced and healthy. And the miracles that they experienced are indescribable. In particular, I remember, so funny. So this is going back, 20 plus years now. And there was a guy named Eric who came into the program after me. I'd already been in there about 6 months, struggling. I was doing great. And then I'd have a strawberry or something. I never relapsed on sugar. I came in passionate about never picking that stuff up again.
Mm-hmm.
But I would do little things like I didn't finish my lunch. Like it was a really strict program. Oh, I ate my extra strawberries and be like, A1. Anyways. But Eric came in very dramatically. He came in late. He was morbidly obese. He was probably the largest person I'd ever seen in my life, like probably over 350 pounds. He was early 60s. He was clearly miserable. You could just feel his energy. He was depressed. He slunched in. He happened to sit beside me. He smelt. His hair was it was very thin and it was greased over. Like this was a man who was hanging by a thread. I don't even know what kept him hanging on, what hope kept him alive. But he got it. He came in. He's like, I'm at bottom. Like, I need to turn this around. I'm literally eating myself to death. And so we all gathered around him and we loved on him and we welcomed him and he got the meal plan and he did all the tools and he went to all the meetings and he did it. And 6 months later, this guy comes to the front of the room holding a pair of jeans saying, I can almost fit in one side of the pants. He was on 12 medications coming in. He was off 11. He had one more that his doctor was confident he'd be able to deprescribe. He'd lost 75 pounds.
Amazing.
Only men can do that. Like I've never seen that happen with a woman, but he just like, God.
There it is. Yeah.
So not fair. But yeah, he just melted off him. And he's like, I am no longer diabetic. I was told I would never be able to reverse this.
Right.
There was no cure for diabetes. Well, there's a cure for diabetes. Thank you very much. It's you eat whole foods, don't snack, fall in love with them, eat abundantly. That's it. That's all I did. There was no exercise I didn't exercise for like months and months. I didn't have the energy, but now I do. And I'm starting to do a bit more of that. And I remember thinking, why is this not on the front page of the New York Times?
Exactly.
This is the most incredible thing. And I kept thinking, diabetes is reversible. And people are like, no, yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. It's easy. It's for the most part. I mean, I know that when you've done enough metabolic damage, there's genuine injury, right? Maybe not all of it can be reversed, but for the most part,
Yes.
it's easy. Yeah. So there we go. Sorry, long story.
No, you're good. So you went to this, you did the 12-step program, and then I know you implement other things in your coaching practice. And so what other things are you implementing? So, it's the mindset piece, it's the breaking up, it's what
Yeah.
else? Because I want you to give the listeners so much hope that like you can
Okay.
overcome sugar addiction, food addiction, because you and I both know we can do this. We're living proof. Both of us shouldn't be as healthy and happy and vibrant as we are today because we were both really food addicted.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So give my listeners some hope here because your story is
Okay, great.
amazing. Now
Well,
what?
okay. So I will say that I think there's at least 8 different 12 steps, probably more 12-step programs for food addiction recovery. And they're awesome and they're amazing and I owe them my life. And for me, it wasn't the end of the road. It sounds so ungrateful to say this, but at a certain point after years well, it was under 3 years. It was between 2 and 3 years. And let's just say 2.5. I really don't remember. I know it was under 2, under 3, and it was over 2 when I left the program. But my sponsor said you need to go to 3 meetings a week and they had to be in person in this particular 12-step program. And you need to do an AWOL and you need to do this and you need to do that and blah, 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 and you have to do it all perfectly or you go back to day 1 or I drop you as my sponsee. So there was quite a lot of pressure and threat and perfectionism and commitment, time commitment. And at one point in time, several times as my daughter was getting older, there was something on a Wednesday night, like her daycare or something that I wanted to go to and I couldn't because it was my meeting night. And I just thought,
All of a sudden there's these conflicts. Yeah.
all of a sudden there's this sense of like, I'm never going to do anything on a Wednesday night again because I have to go to my meeting.
Right.
Now, truthfully, everything's gone online and these programs are so much more flexible, so much more flexible. But back then it was in person and you had to go in person. There wasn't any other option. And you had to do 3 meetings a week minimum. And there was only 2 food addiction. And I had to go to an AA meeting and sit in the room and say absolutely nothing and have a bunch of people talk about alcohol. That was never my issue. Could have been, but I got spared. But anyways, so I thought there's got to be a way to like, just like have this be done, right? Like, why can't it be like the ex-smoker that's it, they're done. 5 years later, they're looking at the poor people outside in this cold smoking their cigarettes thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that used to be me. Why can't I be that kind of sugar addict, right?
Right.
But I was told in my 12-step programs, never going to happen. You need to work this program perfectly, this way in order to stay protected, to stay safe. Well, I left the program for 2 reasons. One, I was profoundly underweight and the meal plan was wrong and they couldn't figure it out. They just kind of had a one-size-fits-all meal plan and they just kept upping the meat. God, that was a disaster. I know people who are blood type O's, like literally they could feast on meat. No problem. Not happening for me. I was constipated. I was having infections. My face was swollen. My eyes were puffy. I felt terrible. Not my path. I can do some meat. I cannot do the carnivore kind of level of meat that most others seem to be doing just fine on. So I knew metabolically there was something different about me. And I am a blood type A, and I don't know if there's any truth to any of it. But I do recall when we did our training that Julia Ross says, I've worked with 30,000 people over 30 years, and the blood type A's are not my blood type O's. They are really great carnivore, paleo, ancestral, but my blood type A's, for some reason, they do better. They need more carbohydrates. So anyways, I was terribly underweight. I was 112 pounds at 5'7", and I was tired and exhausted. And they were trying. It wasn't for a lack of effort, but I was doing like 6 to 8 ounces of meat every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They had bumped my fats. It wasn't working.
This wasn't working for you.
It wasn't working. And it had stopped being a magical, total, the joy of the answered prayer experience. And then I moved to a very small community where there were no meetings. So I kind of went back out there on my own, still holding up the hope that there's got to be a way to not have this be a full-time job, not feel like recovery is a full-time job. I know it's always going to be effort. I will always have to prioritize this part of my life. And then fast forward, I decided to put together the Kick Sugar Summit. I was watching that sugar film from Damon Gameau down in Australia, and it was so good and so exciting. And I was like, oh my God, people are talking about this. It's so great because I no one in my family supported me. They were like, oh, it's too extreme. You're just making this stuff up. And, university thought I was out to lunch. And anyways, right. But I could see that when you have a big budget musical with a movie star who's talking about sugar, there was a tipping point here. And I thought, this is so exciting and so fantastic. And then about halfway through the movie, he's asking this poor kid who's 18, who had Mountain Dew soda pop in his bottle, rot all of his teeth out of his head at the age of 18. He said to this poor kid, so like, dude, are you going to stop drinking Mountain Dew? And I was just like, did he just ask that kid that question? So I grabbed the remote. I was watching with my husband on the couch, and I grabbed the remote and I paused it, and I was like, oh my God. Don't tell me he's only going to talk about sugar and not talk about sugar addiction. He didn't touch sugar addiction. Really? He only talked about how terrible sugar is for the body, and how, just even in a matter of weeks, you can show all the damage it does. Metabolically, labs, you can see it.
Yep.
But he didn't talk about sugar addiction. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so unfair. I had these flashbacks of me 20, just give it up. Just, reduce it, eliminate it, sort of minimize it. You'll be fine. I'm like, oh my God, if people don't understand that this can be really, really difficult.
Really difficult.
That is unfair. So I said to Sean, you know what? So we finished the movie and there was no mention of addiction. No mention. So I said to him, I'm going to do one of those like thingies, like they do on the internet, those summit things. And it's going to be about sugar addiction. Like I want it to be raising awareness. It's so important to understand the harms of sugar, but it's so, so, so important that if you're motivated to start to reduce or eliminate it, you need to know if you fall on the addiction spectrum, because your path forward is very different than somebody who's not addicted. Very, very different. And you're going to need support. Most likely. There's probably rare exceptions and there's probably outliers, but for the most part, you're going to need support. Yes. You're going to need support. You're going to need some specific addiction recovery tools. So I did the summit. One of my speakers on that summit was a man named Jack Trimpey, who wrote a book called Rational Recovery. And it's quite a unique approach to addiction recovery. And his process is very much the breakup model. So the 12-step program is just for today, which is beautiful. And it works and it gets you traction until you can get to that moment where you're like, you feel so good that you never want to go back to eating the foods that made you feel bad. But it can take 3, 6, 9 months, a year for people to feel that good, and their brain chemistry is healing, and they've got so many habits in play that it really, they're able to get to that point where they're like, oh, forget this one day at a time. I hope I never go back, right? That happens for people in the 12-step programs. Jack just cuts to the chase. Jack's like, here's the deal.
Don't do it.
Just, let's just go to the breakup. Under one caveat, are you of two minds? He'll say, is there a part of you that truly wants to break up? You're done. You're done with the experience of addiction and the struggle and the frustrations and the obsession around all that. Like, if you're done, and is there a part of you that's like, oh no, I really like it. Let's moderate. Let's figure another path. Let's intuitive eat. Let's just only do it special occasions, whatever. There's a part that's trying to negotiate with the part that's like, we're done. This is the true self. This is the addict, the teeny tiny part of us that, I call it let's just call it the sugar dragon. This is the voice of the sugar dragon. And he'll say, once you're of two minds, what happens in addiction is just this power struggle back and forth. There's some total war inside, conflict, frustration, And every day that you eat sugar, once you're of two minds, every day that you eat sugar or flour or junk food, or you binge eat, or you do something that's out of alignment with what your higher self senses is the right path with food, you're going to end your day in shame, guilt, and regret. And that's just becomes this horrible way of living.
Yeah.
It's a terrible relationship with ourselves, our body, food itself. So Jack comes along and he says, all right, what we need to do is take this part that knows the truth, that's awakened, because you're already of two minds. And once you're of two minds, you're never going to go back to one. This part is never going to capitulate to the true self. And the true self is never going to be, it blends, but it's never truly going to forget its truth that, I need to break up a sugar. So he says the goal is to have these two separate, that the true self is able to observe and ignore the urges to eat sugar and to recognize that's not me. That's a teeny tiny part of me. That's a rogue pleasure drive. And once you can get that separation, then it's quite easy, because there's no willpower required to do what you want to do. And when you stay connected to your truth and what you want to do with food, and when the urge, the thoughts, the images, the sensations, the memories, the smells, the temptations, all of that comes up, and you could go, I see you. That's the sugar dragon wanting something. You want the donut. Yeah, no. And the whole thing shifts when you understand that your no is enough, because the sugar dragon has no power to move your body. And that was the piece that's missing. Most people don't get it. Once they get it, it's like this massive light bulb goes on, and they're like, oh, that part of me has no power. I call it the do nothing approach to addiction. Just don't act on it. Don't act on it. Do nothing. You don't need any willpower. You don't need energy. You could go slump on the couch. You could go take a nap, and you just don't act on it. I see that urge. I feel it. The dragon's got its knickers in a knot. I'm the boss. I move my body. One of us is going to win. It's going to be me. And it's like claiming your power. It's the opposite of powerlessness. It's the knowing that you are 100% powerful, and the dragon will freak out until it really believes you. And then it takes months and months and months of you just saying, nope, no argument. I'm not discussing it, not rethinking my decision, no exceptions, none. I'm not activating that decision. There's no first bite happening. And once you're consistent, there's a moment in time when all the neuro and physiological miracles happen, and you're feeling great, and you've lost your weight, and your moods are better, and life is good. But it doesn't mean the addiction doesn't sort of occasionally flare up. But eventually, at one point, your dragon and your body that have been resisting this moratorium, this total clean breakup, will come to you and say, you were right. You were right. This is better. We are peaceful.
Right.
And it's a whole different world.
Yeah. And that's when you just don't even think about it anymore.
Don't even think about it.
Yeah. You just walk.
You're the ex-smoker.
You walk by the donuts, you walk by whatever it is, and you're like,
You can bake it. You can serve it.
Yep.
You don't feel good about it because you're like, oh, I love these people too much to be doing this. But anyways, okay. They still want cookies, whatever.
Right. It's so true. So true. I love it. And do you use the amino acids with any of your clients?
Cannot.
What's that?
No, I cannot. I'm one of those sensitives. Julia said to me, yeah, you're one of 30 people. She goes, I call you the sensitives. I can't do I can do almost no supplements.
Yeah. I remember now that you say that. Yeah. You were very, very sensitive. And there's some people like that out there.
Yep.
So yeah.
I'm the rare freak outlier, but yeah, they can be, I know they can be very helpful. Unfortunately, I don't have living proof of it, but you know what? Truthfully, I started so young. For the most part, I don't know that I need them. I don't know that I need them. Yeah.
And they can be very life-changing for people to, crush that dragon as well, to help them not even think of things anymore, and, boost that serotonin, and just, cut those cravings too. So I love it. So good. So what do you feel like your life is like now? Is there any piece of you that you feel like is still struggling, or is that dragon totally tamed and you're like, not an issue at all anymore?
Oh, not an issue. I don't even think about it, so much so that I actually find it sometimes, it's a terrible thing to confess as a sugar coach, but like, sometimes I'm bored with it. I'm like, I want to get people to just get it, because the good stuff's coming, like the deeper
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah.
That's where, I mean, there's always next levels, right? Okay, ooh, I'm a whole food woman, easy, peaceful, deeply grateful.
Yes.
Occasionally my dragon will flare up. It does. And I just think, wow, after all these years, honey, nope, the answer is still no.
Oh, no, you don't get that. Yeah.
No, no.
And I think it's hard because you and I have been doing this for really decades, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's easy for us now. And when we look at our clients and like, oh, if you just get on that other side, like you're saying, you can get on that other side. And I think, because we've been doing it for so long and our life is so good, people look at it and go, you just don't understand. But we do.
Oh, but we do.
Oh, but we do. Telling your story, and I don't want to tell my whole story on this because this is my interview with you, but some of the same things that Florence has been talking about, just that deep despair and the things that you do when you're food addicted, from trampling out in the snow to get those 4 extra cookies, or I even stole food out of the grocery stores. I did, because I was that addicted. And I mean, I stole my roommate's food, and, I was constantly replacing stuff. And, you just did so many things in secret. Like, it's really a true addiction. And so we hear you and we see you out there, and those listeners, we get what you're saying. And we don't want you to live that way anymore. So Florence, tell us where they can reach you. And I know you do the Kick Sugar Summit, which will be a few months from now, but tell us about you and how people can work with you.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, the Kick Sugar Summit's free, which is a really great, well, it's free while it's live, but you know what? You
Right.
could still go and get the digital package, which is $97. And it's amazing. Like, the interviews this year, like, you could listen to, there's 60. It was
Oh,
ridiculous.
that's fantastic, Florence. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I know. It was like, I was struggled to get 23 in my first one. But anyways, so you can buy that for $97 and just drip out an interview a week. I also have the Kick Sugar Coach podcast, and I interview speakers, and great, Laurie, for you to come in and talk about amino acids. Although we did have, it's okay, it would be fine to duplicate because you have the sugar addiction recovery story too.
Mm-hmm.
We did have nutrition for mental addiction academy. Oh, as soon as I say her name, you'll know. Not that it matters. Doesn't matter.
Got it.
You can also find me on my website, florencechristopher.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all of that will be in the show notes. So everybody can find her and all of her amazing resources. So this has been great. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience?
I feel like I should just talk a little bit about the sugar quiz. Like, how do you know if you,
yeah, let's go into that.
Just in case you're like, well, how do I know if I'm really addicted? Because that's and remember that it's so important to never say I am an addict. We're not addicts. That's not the truth. What we do is we can have the experience of addiction, which means that if we take the first bite, there's a rise in our brain chemistry, there's a crashing, and there's cravings, and then there's compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. And if that's something you can see as a pattern, then you might fall on the spectrum. But the people who, sugar consumers fall into 3 categories: sugar users, sugar abusers, and sugar addicts. And sugar users are people who consume it, which is very hard to avoid. Most of us are sugar users, unless you're Laurie and I, who are like, no, thank you, not going back. You're not going past this tongue. I know what you do once you're inside. Thank you very much. I literally become the puppet. I'm Pinocchio. It's like, it's just pulling my strings till eventually, I get so tired of it that I like fight back with some feist, and I'm like, done, enough. Then there's sugar abusers. And these are people that are consuming way too much sugar. They're probably emotional eaters, or it's just they're not taking the time they need to make nourishing meals. But with a little bit of effort, some good science, some new recipes, a little support, they'll unhook from sugar beautifully and be able to make some exceptions. They'll be like mostly sugar-free. They'll be, dabblers strategically. They'll be like, okay, I'll make this exception on this day. And when it's over, you're not hijacked. You might have a little echo, a little bit of a craving for more, maybe the next day or something, but you're going to be able to go, no, enough. I said last night I'd have pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, and that's it. We're done now, right? That you are clear about your boundaries and you're able to hold to them fairly easily. And then there's sugar addicts. And that power struggle, we will not win it. That dragon, those urges will, They'll outlast any willpower we have. Like, that's
Right.
not going to happen.
Yep.
We have to win it at the level of the mind. We have to be clear about what our truth is and stay connected to it. So the evidence of addiction are these. Have you seen an escalation in consumption over the years? So it used to be you could have 3 cookies and now there's 3 Oreos of cookies happening. Do you crave it? Do you have withdrawal symptoms when you stop eating it? Like when you go cold turkey, do you get headaches, shakes, fatigue, depression? People who do not have sugar addiction don't have these experiences. They don't have withdrawal symptoms. They don't have cravings. Cravings are not normal. I have no cravings. Like occasionally I would say, but not for sugar, but like maybe I might have a little bit of a pull for something. And I know the difference between a body saying, oh, I'd really like some more spinach, versus my body saying, ooh, can we have a double serving of blueberries? I'm looking for a little extra sweet, right? And I know that now in my life, that pull for sweet is always a sign. When I'm trying to, when there's a pull to do something with food that's outside of my meal plan, I know I'm looking for one of 2 experiences. I'm trying to get more energy, or I'm trying to numb out. So I know now that if there's a pull for food that's off my meal plan, that I need one of the 2. And if I'm looking for energy, exercise. If I'm looking for sedation, numbing, it's quiet time. It's meditation. It's go sit in the dark, do nothing. No, it's not watch TV. It's not even distraction. It's less than that. It's just let your body drop into a place of total silence and quiet. It's just overwhelmed. There's something big coming up and it just needs some space to process and to not be demanded upon. So give those to yourself, right? Those are really what your body wants when it's pulling from unholy foods. So another symptom of addiction is that you've had repeated failed efforts to reduce or eliminate your consumption. If you've been yo-yo dieting, you're on again, off again, it's a hallmark of addiction. And the kicker, the grand poobah, you are continuing to consume it despite known adverse consequences. You know full well that this is harming you. This is self-harming behavior, and you're continuing to do it, right? And the only reason you would continue to use and abuse sugar is because it's doing something for your brain chemistry. There's a payoff.
Right.
There's a pleasure, there's a numbing impact, there's something. And that isn't, people who don't have addiction don't have that experience. No one's ever going to become addicted to a substance that doesn't actually make them feel good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't change the brain chemistry. Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing.
There's nothing there.
Like people go, yeah, I have 3/4 of a cookie, and I'm like, that's nice. Yeah. But it's not lighting up their brains like a pinball machine. But if it's lighting up your brain like a pinball machine, your brain's going to remember that.
Yes.
It's going to remember when I really want to be lit up like a pinball machine. I want some energy. I want pleasure. I want to feel good. Or I want to sort of numb out and crash and go and drop into the freeze response. I know what foods will do that for me because we're very brain sensitive that way to food. Not everybody is. Some people are like, they get almost no pleasure from food. They're on the far end of the spectrum. We're on this end of the spectrum. And the beautiful thing is, final words I'll say. Clearly I could talk all day about this. Sorry.
I understand. I could too. I'm like, oh, we could go for hours on this.
Please know that you are not giving up the pleasure of food when you break up with processed refined carbohydrates. Right now there are favorites, but I promise you, you will fall in love with whole foods as much, if not more, than the junk. You just have to give it time. Your brain chemistry balances, your taste buds recalibrate. I can taste the sweet in iceberg lettuce and Brussels sprouts.
Yes.
It's so sweet. There's so much sugar on all the good stuff and all of the whole foods, and you will be so stinking in love with your meal when you look down on it and it's abundant and colorful, and you'll be like, I didn't know. It's kind of like when you broke up with the asshole and then eventually find your life partner. You're like, thank God I let him go,
right?
Because this wouldn't have come in my life. It's like that.
Yes, completely, Florence. Yes.
Yeah.
So good. I love it. All right. Well, thank you very much. I know this has provided a lot of hope and healing and information to all the listeners. So I appreciate you being so vulnerable and open and sharing your story. It's been fantastic.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. Make sure that you get all of Florence's free resources, connect to her Sugar Summit, and, connect with her on all her social media aspects and everything we've got in the show notes for you. So make sure you also like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends, your family, your enemies, whoever you want. Just share the podcast with somebody so that we get the word out, because we want to bring hope and healing to the world. And I thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.